Welcome back to day 8 of Bible 365 with Kathy Carter, which is me. And the idea of Bible 365 is going through a reading of the Bible in 1 year. You can always take a little bit longer if you need to, but the point is to read the Bible from start to finish and to get the entire concept, the big picture of what it looks like, of the Bible story and what that Bible story looks like. So today we're on day 8 and we're following the 1 year chronological Bible plan. For those of you who haven't seen this book yet, I feel like I show it every day, but this is the Bible version of it, which is in particular order. As you can see, they have the days marked and everything. So that's an order of our Bible study. And if you don't want to go and buy the Bible, which is completely fine, they have a printable plan online at the 1 year Bible 1 year chronological Bible online.com. And you can download their daily reading plan. So today, our reading picks up in Genesis 25. So what we have done so far is there was the beginning, and then there was Noah, and then there was Abraham, and then there was Isaac. And Isaac has married Rebekah at this point, and we move on to some of Abraham's descendants. So this was actually a really short reading, but I found for me, a lot of interesting information in there that doesn't necessarily do anything particular except that it's just unique and interesting. So it doesn't necessarily change the way I see God, but I find it really interesting. So uh, starting out in Genesis 25:1, I just want to go over verse 1. It says, Abraham had taken another wife, and her name was Keturah. And the reason why I want to note that this is for our idea of timing in the Bible. And sometimes in Genesis it's chronological, and we mostly see that it looks like it's chronological, maybe not necessarily back to back days. Sometimes it's many years, sometimes it's a big picture, and then we sort of focus in really shallow. And for this one, it says that he has a wife, and her name is Keturah, and he did have a wife, and her name was Sarah. So was this a second wife, or was this a wife after? So a second wife where they were wives together, or was it a wife after Sarah? And I feel like there are actually two versions that we can take from. We can, I think you can look at it in the way that it was his second wife at the same time, or you can look at it second wife chronologically. So one of the ways that I can see that it looks like second wife chronologically is because we were just in a section yesterday or the day before where God tells Abraham to bring Isaac up to be sacrificed. And when he tells him to bring Isaac up to be sacrificed, it says, take your only son, the son that you love. And so what we find here is Keturah actually has many sons: Zimran, Jokshan, Medan, Midian, Ishbak, and Shua. And so at that time, Isaac was the only son. Now, before I get that in too far in that, I know Ishmael was also a son, but Ishmael was not the son that was promised. It was the son from Hagar that Abraham took out of, he took Hagar out of his wedding. So he had this child out of his marriage, not before his marriage, but while he was married to Sarah, and he had this wife sort of outside of the marriage. And so Ishmael was not the one that God said was his only son, and it wasn't considered his first son. And so, because he's not the son of the promise. So it looks like these sons that were had afterwards by the wife that was Keturah would not have been alive at that time. So it leads me to believe in one sentence that it's possible she is a second wife after Sarah died. However, the other side is in verse 5, it says, Abraham left everything he owned to Isaac. Verse 6, but while he was still living, he gave gifts to the sons of his concubines. This, plural, more than one. So we know that Hagar was a concubine. And the word for concubine is a woman that is not his wife, that does not have the privileges of a wife, but that does have a relationship with a man and may have kids with him. So it's there's a wife, And then there's a concubine, which is sort of underneath. She doesn't share in the same, her and her children even don't share in the same privileges. So the sons don't get the financial blessings. The sons don't get, sometimes they don't get the last name. Sometimes they don't get the birthright. They don't get the covenant. They don't get the things that are promised to the son of the wife. And so we can see that there's a very distinct difference between a wife and a concubine. Well, here it says concubines, which means there's more than one. Could there be one that we never hear the name of? I think that, yes, that's always a possibility that Abraham could have had other wives. I don't think that's true in this situation because it feels like that would be the only thing that's not discussed is Abraham's other concubines. We hear about Hagar, we hear about Sarah, we hear about Keturah. Why wouldn't we hear about any other concubines or any other women in his life besides that? So there's a possibility that Keturah is actually a concubine and not a wife. And so here's the other side of why I think she might be a concubine and not a wife. One of the things that I try and do is I try to go to this program called the Blue Letter Bible, which you can easily find on the internet. And the Blue Letter Bible has all of the original text from the Bible in Hebrew and Greek. So the way it was originally written, it has all of those words in there and it has the meaning of those words. Now, it's not as easy as that because sometimes there's a certain tense to it or things like that. And so it is a little bit of a challenge, but it does give us a flavor of what these words actually meant, what they were actually. It's just like when we use certain words, they have multiple meanings in our lives. So my my daughter says right now, focus up. And it doesn't necessarily mean to focus, to kind of tighten up and gaze in on something and look at something. It can mean any number of things because she uses words in a really funny way. So, in that same respect, this word can be used multiple ways. So, I look back at the Hebrew and looking at concubine, concubine means concubine. So, that is the original Hebrew word means concubine, which means a woman that is underneath. But the original word of wife in this case is a Hebrew word called isha. And the Hebrew word called isha in the Old Testament, when it is used actually two different ways. It's used as wife and it's used as woman. So it's used as wife 425 times. It's used as woman 324 times. And so context matters. So the way these things are used in sentences actually makes a difference to what the meaning of the word is. And so when we see this word actually used the first time, it's in Genesis 2:22, and it's where God made Isha, where God made woman. And I'm going to assume at that point he doesn't mean wife because they haven't become man and wife, although we do see that later that that's true. But at this point, that doesn't seem to be true. She's just created, and she's created out of him, and then children are created through her. And so she's called Isha. She's called a woman. So now if we change wife here, and again, I want to say change, but it is the same word. Abraham had taken another woman whose name was Keturah. Then that could make sense that she would be one of the plural concubines down in verse 5. And so for me, unfortunately, I feel like that does make a little bit more sense that she is the concubine and not the actual wife of Abraham. Timing wise, it still could be after Sarah, but I don't know why then she wouldn't be an actual wife and put up in the same place. So moving on from that, but still going in verse 5. Verse 5 has a lot of meat in it. So it says everything, Abraham left everything he owned to Isaac. While he was still living, he gave gifts to the sons of his concubines. So what we see is, I mean, if we're going to use Ishmael as an example, the gift there wasn't too great. He gave her food. He gave him, because him and his mom Hagar gave them food and water and sent them on their way. But these children, he gave gifts. So he gave something to them, right? Something in his household. And what we know about Abraham is Abraham was very well off. He was a foreigner living in a land that wasn't his own. However, if you guys remember from a few chapters back, he had a lot of people that he provided for. So he took some of those people out, if you remember, and he went to war and saved his nephew Lot with those people. And so he had a lot of people in his land that he was feeding and that had jobs, and he had a lot of animals, and he had a lot of things to care for, and he had a lot of property. So these were all things that he did own, and these were the majority of these things he was giving to Isaac and not to his other sons. And Isaac got these things upon his death. So Isaac got the covenant, he got the birthright, he got the home, he got the land, he got all of these things that were promised to him. He got them after he got them after Abraham died, and the other children got things while Abraham was still alive. And then Abraham sent them away from Isaac. So the land is meant to be Isaac's land. We see very clearly he sent Ishmael away, and Ishmael started a new nation somewhere else. And these guys moved away as well. It doesn't say they started a new nation anywhere, but or that they were a nation of people, but they just moved away from Isaac. And Isaac had that land to himself and his household and his family when Abraham died. Okay, so moving on, we see Ishmael's descendants. So if we go to Genesis 25, 12 through 18, we see all the people that Ishmael had. Remember that Ishmael was promised many descendants and many nations, even though he was going to be, looks like he was going to be fighting kind of with everyone. He would be fighting with everyone. Everyone would be fighting with him, but he would be the father of many people and many nations. And so we see that he has 12 sons, and those 12 sons make up tribes. One of the things that I looked up, I researched some historical data to see if anyone can trace their lineage back to him. And there was some evidence that proves that there are nations in the Middle East that can trace their lineage all the way back to Ishmael's sons, to his some of the 12 sons of his tribe. And so it doesn't seem like there are any main people groups in the Middle East, but there are smaller people groups that can trace their lineage back, which I found pretty fascinating. Moving on to the births of the twins. Rebecca, much like her mother-in-law Sarah, was unable to conceive, and not as far along as Sarah was, but it looks like she's probably in the neighborhood of like 40 to 50. We don't know for 100% certainty. They give Isaac's age, but they actually don't give her age, so we're not 100% sure how old she is. But we know that she is past probably what would be considered the normal time when women give birth to children. And so Isaac prays. Verse 21, it says, Isaac prayed to the Lord on behalf of his wife because she was childless. So it reiterates that relationship that we saw in the prior chapter, where it said that he loved her and that she comforted him. And so it seems to continue that he loves her enough that he prays for her to be able to have children and not be a woman in that time that was childless. The Lord answers because he is good and because he is gracious. And I say that with the full knowledge that he doesn't always answer every prayer that we ask. And I'm going to say it doesn't mean he is not good. It means in this particular situation, he answered Isaac faithfully and lovingly, because that was the choice that he made at that time. And so there are times where we ask for things and the answer is no. And that's a really hard thing because we're probably hoping that it is in God's plan or in the will of God to have those things. And just at that time, it is not. But in this, he answered because he is a loving and good God. And so he did answer the prayer. So she did become pregnant. And when she was pregnant, she felt the babies jostling around in her stomach, which is having had one baby at a time. It's cool, right, to be able to see a big giant heel scraping across their belly. But when there's two in there and they're kind of fighting each other, I'm sure it was extremely uncomfortable. And so as this thing is going on, she asks the Lord, why am I this way? And he answers her. So he gives her an answer. It seems like what he does is he just states what is. He doesn't say, and I will do this, that, or the other. He just states what is. And again, I think the I want to say intent, but it's probably the wrong word that I'm thinking of. It's important to note, because there are differences where God says, this is what I command, this is what I will do, this is what I want to happen. And in this, he just states what is. And what is not really the best of scenarios if you're having a set of twins. Two nations in your womb, sorry. That is a really good thing. So two nations. So it's not just that she's going to have two children. It's that they are actually going to create an entire nation. So they're going to be a people group. That doesn't happen with every human on the planet. So I haven't developed a new people group, but these two actually are the beginning of a new people group. And then these two people groups from within you will be separated. There's the downfall, is that they don't harmonize, they don't unify, and they don't work together, but they're actually separated from each other. And so they will live distinctly different lives away from each other. One people will be stronger than the other. In the grand scheme of things, I don't know if that's bad, but there is definitely going to be a difference. I don't know if it means physical. I don't know if it means spiritual. I'm not really sure what that means, but it does clearly say that one will be stronger with the other. It doesn't say which. But then it finishes by saying the older will serve the younger. This is, in any time period, this is not comfortable. So I have two sons, and I am certain in having those two sons, my middle son, well, my older of two sons is not at any time going to want to serve the younger of two sons. And so it usually is the other way around, where the younger will do the will of the older. The older will say, go get this, or go grab that, or come with me here. And the younger will do it, where it usually isn't the reverse. So even in these times where we don't have these mandatory roles, you usually see that the younger one is not, or the older one is not serving the younger one, but it's usually vice versa. So this is kind of usurping those traditional roles and knocking it out of whack. And so we're going to see what comes with that when those traditional roles are knocked out of whack, and why. Why does that happen? All right, so moving on from there, I'm going to go right into, so we have the prophecy of the sons, and then I want to go right into verse 26. So 26 says, after this, his brother came out. So, as a matter of fact, I want to back it up to 24. When the time came for her to give birth, there were twin boys in her womb. The first to come out was red. So here we go. This is the first, the older. The first to come out was red, and his whole body was like a hairy garment. So she named him Esau. Esau means hairy. So she's naming him a descriptive word, which is what he looks like. After this, his brother came out with his hand grasping Esau's heel. So he was named Jacob. Isaac was 60 years old when Rebekah gave birth to them. So we see how old Isaac was. Okay, so his brother came out. His brother's name was Jacob, and he was grasping the heel of Esau. And so I want to go over a couple of visual things that I noticed. Okay, so grasping the heel, my initial image with grasping the heel reminds me of when you're swimming in a pool. So I grew up with a pool and swimming back and forth laps. And one of the things that you do is you race your friends swimming back and forth laps. Well, I remember when anyone wants to win, if somebody's in front and the other person wants to win, they actually will grab the heel, right, of the person in front of them and drag them back so then they can push forward and win. And some of you are going to say that I'm crazy, that you guys never cheated in that way, but we did. And so we would grab their heel and we would push them, but we would pull them back so we can gain an advantage, right? So we can kind of usurp them and get over them. When I look up the meaning of the word heel, it actually means to usurp. So remember, I told you I looked up those biblical definitions, and the word Jacob means heel, and to heel is to be behind or supplant or overreach, right? This is from the Hebrew word. This goes all the way back for me. This goes all the way back to Genesis 3. So I don't know if you guys remember because it was a few days ago, but when we go to Genesis 3 in our book, Genesis 3:15, it says here, I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your offspring and hers. He will crush your head, and you will strike his heel. So we remember, so that imagery of heal, right? We weren't 100% sure what that meant. Still not 100% sure what that means, but there is a meaning. So enmity is a feeling of being actively opposed. So something being actively opposed, right? So remember that idea that I had of like drawing back the heel. So being actively opposed. This is to the serpent. So we can see that this is to the serpent. He will crush your head, the woman's offspring, whoever that is, right? Somebody directly in the line, one single person of the woman. He will crush your head, but you will strike his heel. And it makes me think of so Jacob, right, tried to overthrow or supplant the birthright, right? He's trying to pull Esau back, or he's holding his heel while Esau's coming out. And it makes me think of Satan on the earth, bruising heel, right? That he's trying to supplant God or replace God here on earth. Not 100% sure if that's right. I always like to leave you with that because I'm not 100% sure. It just made me think of this idea of heels because I don't think any of us ever talk like that. So, this idea of what it means to grasp a heel or to have a heel or to strike his heel, right? It's a confusing concept. But if we think about the meaning of what heel means, and even I was talking to my husband. My husband was a professional wrestler for years, and the bad guy is actually called a heel. And I never even considered what that meant, but it came to mind when I was reading this. And so it's just something to consider that maybe that's what it means here. Maybe it means that you will strike his heel means that when he's here, you're trying to, Satan is trying to overthrow him. And so maybe that's the meaning of that. Something to be aware of as we think of, Satan coming in and whispering stuff and trying to overthrow this idea of God in our life, just like he did in the very beginning by asking the woman, did he really say these things? So that is for today. That was one chapter. I know I had a lot in there, and I would love if you guys would comment below if you have any thoughts, one way or the other. That is fantastic. I would love to hear it. If this has been a blessing to you, if you have enjoyed it, please like it. So give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel. That way, if you subscribe to the channel, it will immediately come in your, it'll show up in YouTube every day when I post these videos because I post them every single day for the next year. And then share it with other people so anyone else can join with you or join with me in a daily reading of our Bible. Thanks for joining.